Yeah. Right. You know what? I have something in here. And we do it again.
Good evening, everyone. So we're going to get started in just a few minutes. We're waiting for Commissioner Altman to show up, and he'll be here in just a few. Thank you for your patience.
Move his over here. Me move back over there. Oh, I mean. Oh, yeah, sure, that's fine.
Yeah, last time did we do it that way?
We did.
Yeah, we did.
Remember, he like set up. Hmm. David. Yeah.
Are you ready to begin, Chair Chris?
Yes, we are. Good evening, everyone. It is 6:30, and I call this Planning Commission meeting to order. If everyone will please rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
With liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Nicole, roll call, please.
Yes. Commissioner Eric Altman is currently absent. Commissioner Andrew Goff.
Present.
Commissioner Crystal Malari.
Present.
Vice Chair Devet Mohammed.
Present.
Chair Brando Cruz.
Present.
Youth Commissioner Ramandeep Jawanda.
Present.
Thank you, Nicole. Moving on to public comment. This time is reserved for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on items of interest that are not on the agenda and are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. It is recommended that speakers limit their comments to 3 minutes each, and it is requested that no comments be made during this period on items on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to address the Planning Commission on items on the agenda should comment via email prior to the start of the meeting, or to verbally comment on the item during the meeting. Click the raise your hand button if joining by computer, or press star 9 by joining phone when the item is called. Let's see. The Planning Commission is prohibited by law from taking any actions on matters discussed that are not on the agenda, and no adverse conclusion should be drawn if the Planning Commission does not respond to public comment at this time. Speakers are asked to please speak clearly and provide their name. Any handouts for distribution to the Planning Commission must be emailed 3 p.m. on meeting day. At this time, I open public comment.
Is there anybody in chambers? Ken Leary?
Test, test. There it is. Good evening, Commissioners. Kenneth Leary, American Canyon resident. I just wanted to say congratulations to Brando. You will be leaving the Planning Commission, and I want to thank you for your years of service and your dedication. And I can't say good luck, because it's not a matter of luck. It's a matter of talent and experience and knowledge. So you'll do a good job on council.
Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome.
Beth Marcus.
Thank you. I don't have to say my name. Ken just stole my thunder. I wanted to say congratulations to Brando, and also to our new youth commissioner who is here this evening with us. We look forward to seeing you at every meeting, but we'll start seeing you at City Council meeting.
Yes, you will. Thank you,
All
Beth.
right.
Is there anyone else in the room that would like to speak on a non-agendized item? All right, seeing none, is there anyone on Zoom that would like to speak on a non-agendized item? There are no additional public comments.
Thank you, Nicole. At this time, I close public comment. Moving on to agenda changes. Director Cooper, are there any agenda changes?
Thank you, Chair Cruz. There are no agenda changes tonight.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to the consent calendar. At this time, I am seeking a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of our consent calendar.
I'll second.
Okay.
Roll call, please.
Oops. Yes, just one moment. Hold on. Okay. Commissioner Andrew Goff.
Aye.
Commissioner Crystal Malari.
Aye.
Vice Chair Devet Mohammed.
Aye.
Chair Brando Cruz.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, moving on to public hearings. The NVRG vertical metal post perimeter fence design permit. And before we go on, I'd like to, are there any disclosures to be made?
I just want to disclose that I went out to the site with the applicant and saw the site.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
I would also like to disclose that I met with Mr. McGrath out on the site to examine the fence.
Thank you, Commissioner Goff. And I'd also like to disclose that I myself went out on Monday to meet with the applicant, Mr. McGrath, on site. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, thank you, Chair Cruz, Planning Commission, members of the public. I'm Brent Cooper, Community Development Director, and pleased to present to you the application for the Napa Valley Ruins and Gardens Perimeter Fence Design Permit. The Napa Valley Ruins and Gardens I think is a very special place that the town has anticipated for many, many years. I know that even as recent as Tuesday's council meeting, the issue came up on how excited we are as a city for the many interesting activities that will happen here. In fact, just now, Fran gave me a bundle of historical documents, and this one here, Blue, it doesn't have a date on it, but it talks about the new downtown and mixed-use project, and it's very interesting. Fran, do you remember what date this was?
Well, if it's talking about the new downtown, it's probably when we incorporated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because these are around those same dates.
Around the same dates, yeah, early 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is really something that's been anticipated for a long time, and there's a lot of exciting things that are planned for it. So as we talk about change in the form of development in the ruins, we want to think about how does this help or contribute to what we all anticipate is the ruins at Napa Valley. As the city attorney would probably tell us, it all begins with the general plan. And so I have some policies here from the general plan that talks about it will be the downtown. Thank you, Fran. You probably were on the committee that helped coin that as well, maybe Fran and some others in the room. And so it's really, that's kind of been a core all the way to the general plan for a long, long time. Another general plan policy relates to being a plaza to facilitate community gatherings and events, some of which already happen today, which are tremendous and a great contribution to life in American Canyon. Along the way to developing the specific plan, there was a group of residents that were appointed by the City Council that formed the Watson Ranch Specific Plan Steering Committee, and there were a number of years of workshops to help clarify and bring into focus what this new community will be. And much like you might expect from the general plan, create an active, vibrant town center, visitor and local serving uses, gathering places for locals, and a unique place that's the gem of American Canyon. So I don't think anyone would disagree with that. The committee was probably about 10 years ago, so some of these ideas really endure over time. We, of course, have the specific plan today, and their Napa Valley Ruins and Gardens figures quite prominently throughout the specific plan document. It's described in a variety of ways.
Sorry about that.
That sounds very urgent.
The town center is the, I probably turned it off.
Anyway,
Sorry.
throughout the specific plan, it really talks about the Napa Valley Ruins and Gardens, probably because of its prominence as a feature within Watson Ranch. And so I went through the specific plan and I found all of the words that described the Napa Valley Ruins and Gardens in one form or another, and I created a word cloud. You can see here, and as you might imagine, there are a lot of words up there in that cloud, which really shows to all of the aspirations and features that are hoped for in the specific plan for the Napa Valley Ruins and Gardens. The way a word cloud works is the largest letters is the word that gets the most use. And so what comes to mind here, way above all the others, is community. And community figures prominently in the specific plan with regard to the Napa Valley Ruins and Gardens as a gathering place for the community, community events, and so on. As we look down, kind of drill down a little deeper on some of the other words, the next larger ones, town and center, certainly figure prominently. Public comes up a lot. They talk about public gardens, public gatherings, public events. Public is really part of, a large part of what makes the Napa Valley Ruins and Gardens. I'm going down one more level, pedestrian, events, gardens, plaza, commercial area, and private. It is privately owned. That's certainly an important thing to recognize. And so those kind of drilling down. I won't go any further than that, but I think when you get among those larger words, you've really covered the bulk of what the Napa Valley Ruins and Gardens is described in the specific plan. So I kind of want to move on to a little more of the technical side of things. Shown here with the arrows, it's pointing out the north and east sides of the Napa Valley Ruins and Gardens. And if you look really closely, I apologize, that map is a bit small, there are some blue lines that designate Class 1 bike trails. So on the north and east side, it's surrounded by Class 1 bike trails. There are in Caltrans standards for bike trails, just for information purposes for the Planning Commission. I know you're not engineers, and we won't be asking you to become engineers tonight. I'm sure, as our Public Works Director would say, it takes a long time to become an engineer, and not that you're not good with numbers. I'm sure you are, but definitely that's a quality that engineers all possess. So Caltrans is an authoritative standard for all kinds of roadway mobility improvements because folks that use state resources for mobility, if there's accidents, they come calling on Caltrans to do something about it. So they're very careful with their standards, and I wanted to just share this with you. The Watson Rail Trail itself are shown within the specific plan. And there are several types of trails within the Watson Ranch. We have some, the trail, it's a bit small, but we do have some that are shown with borders on both sides for a buffer for bicycle riding. And then there is a wider one, multi-use trail that is the River to Ridge Trail. The northern side of the Ruins and Gardens is the River to Ridge Trail. So I wanted to show you the actual application that we received. This is a site plan that came with the application, and it depicts a green line that shows the location of a perimeter fence. I know it says CBG on there, who are engineers, although it's a green line on a map. Pretty much. The description that came with it described the location back of the bike trails right at the property line. The fence depicted in the green line follows along the north side of the Ruins and Gardens, wraps around as you go east to down Rolling Hills, and then wraps around the south side of the Quarry Lake Park. There is a smaller line, at least in terms of brightness, in orange. That's an internal fence. The application tonight does not include that fence. That's a more of an internal aspect of it. Tonight you're looking at the green line. Some of the technical issues yet to be worked out is the city owns property within the Ruins and Gardens. That was dedicated along with the master map several years ago. And so fencing off an area that is city property is certainly something that would be a matter of future discussion. I know that the plans for Watson Ranch were amended a year ago, and so there's, I think, unfinished business as to what happens with that property. But it's just something to remember, but we know about it, and I'm sure that's an issue that will be addressed in the future. Another aspect of this is the fencing encircles the Quarry Lake Park. That's also privately owned, but the city has an access easement into it. So there's also an outstanding question about how that's addressed. I'm sure discussions and the like can take care of that. This morning I received a new proposal, wanted to share with you. I'm not able to discern a substantial difference between the previous one other than the base map is different. And so the same issues that I just discussed with access to city property and the Quarry Lake Park really haven't been resolved, at least with this morning's submittal. One of the things that jumped out with the new one, which I appreciated that we got this morning, because before with the old plan, it's kind of small and hard to read. The green line extended across the driveways for the vehicle access points. And this plan shows it popped out with blue. One of the issues that's an engineering standard is there's always a stacking and queuing analysis necessary when access points onto private property are gated, because vehicles entering the property, if the gates are closed, could stack and queue onto the public street and cause a safety hazard. So that's just something that needs to be evaluated in terms of where the gate would be located. And that's a standard engineering safety issue that affects the public right away. I wanted to review with you some of the conditions of approval. The perspective that staff took with the application is identifying any areas of minimum public safety, relying on engineering standards where there's no discretion per se. And so one of the ones that I know has been an issue of concern with the applicant has to do with the setback of 2 feet along the property line. And the reason for that is if you're riding a bicycle, you might get distracted or something could happen and you might lose control of your bike. And when there's a hard surface immediately adjacent to the trail, you can collide with it. Caltrans acknowledges that condition, back again to the Caltrans standard, and it says that there should be a buffer regardless of the width of the bike lane for safety purposes. But once again, this is really more background information for the Planning Commission because they are built into conditions of approval, but they're based upon minimum engineering standards. Also, when the fence is near the property line, people who are leaving the site might not see folks, as they step onto the trail, might not see a bicycle coming from the distance. And so, once again, there's a line of sight standard in our engineering standards that would kind of require a visibility triangle at those locations so that people can see in either direction and avoid collisions. There are various locations along here where there are utilities, and in order for utility providers to access these facilities when they need to be serviced, there could be sharp kind of 45-degree angles. Once again, for safety purposes, a 45-degree angle could be kind of sharp if you hit it. So we're recommending a 2-foot diagonal corner in locations where the fence changes direction 9 degrees. So it's a safety standard there. And then there are above-ground utilities in some locations. I've identified 2. I don't know if that's accurate. I think they're there to make a point that there are above-ground utilities. In order for the utility provider to access their facility, they need to be able to get around it. So the fence needs to be set back in order for service people to access the utilities. 5 feet is a normal standard for public works staff, but we also don't know and can't speak on behalf of other utility providers. And so the condition says that it's 5 feet or whatever the utility provider requires. One of the issues that we had raised with the applicant and requested that they amend their plan had to do with the perimeter fence along the south side of the Quarry Lake. And the reason for that is that to provide public access easements for it. This plan that we see today still has it there, so there is a condition that would require that segment of the fence to be removed from the plan. Also, In regards to looking closely at today's plan, we're proposing a new condition that would require a stacking and queuing analysis for those vehicle entrances. I don't imagine there would be much to do with the emergency vehicle access, but that is the responsibility of the fire authority, and they haven't been consulted. And so whatever their standards would be what would be analyzed. We can't speak for them. It's a different agency than the city. And then the other one, which provides access to the parking lot, you can imagine a lot of vehicles, particularly with the venues within the Napa Valley Ruins and Gardens, attracting a lot of cars, whether they're coming or going. So I finally got around, I've talked a lot with that graphic, so I finally got around to, here's the fence itself. So this is a graphic that was provided with the application. It describes an 8-foot tall, untreated steel picket fence. Pickets, I believe, are 4 inches apart, and they would be proposed to be located immediately back of the public right-of-way. Here's a photograph that was received with the application. You can see, because the pickets are 4 inches apart, clearly if you're looking directly at it, you can see through it, which was, I think, a nice feature that the applicant presented, and I think everyone might agree that it's nice to be able to see through the fence. As you step back and away from the fence, the visuality of it tends to narrow the distance between, just because of the optics. So from most perspectives, away from looking directly at it, it is going to have the appearance of either a solid or semi-solid fence. So we kind of get to the point now where I mentioned this is what the Planning Commission, now that I've talked all this time, here's what we're here to do, Planning Commission. The specific plan does designate all architecture and site approvals require a design permit, and the zoning code delegates the Planning Commission to that. The proposals that are received must be consistent with the goals, policies, and regulations of the Watson Ranch specific plan and the community design guidelines, which is in Appendix A. Here are a couple of design guidelines. It refers to the Ruins and Gardens as the heart of the Watson Ranch area, hub of activity. Quality design is important, with a perception to the Watson Ranch community. So it's talking about what does this look like from within Watson Ranch community, not just inside the Ruins and Gardens itself. Architecture and landscaping create a village atmosphere where people are comfortable to mix and mingle and return over and over again. It's a place where residents and visitors should feel comfortable, whether they're a participant with a street fair or quietly having coffee, time with family, friends, shopping, or just taking advantage of the site. Another guideline refers to the perimeter of the ruins. The planning should be reminiscent of an Italian hill town. A variety of soft textures and flowing landscape, olive trees, grapes coexist with stark lines and dramatic shapes of the ruins, softening edges and defining spaces. And there's a whole lot of other design guidelines as well. I didn't want to, I did include them in your packet, so I'm sure you've taken a look at that. But I thought I'd highlight a couple here just to give a flavor for what's in the specific plan. Another area that it's important to think about are the development standards. It is zoned for Napa Valley Ruins and Gardens. It has development standards, and what is mentioned here is the setbacks are determined through a design permit, which is the application you're looking at tonight. And the building, it says building setbacks, but it's a fence is a structure, and the standard is flexible to accommodate existing ruins. So we have a very flexible standard with regard to setbacks. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the design permit with conditions of approval, but I wanted the Planning Commission to know that our review was to evaluate it with consistency for minimum safety standards, primarily those that you find in engineering standards. The Planning Commission itself has a little different role as citizens of American Canyon here to evaluate a project as residents and looking at fulfilling the goals and policies of the Watson Ranch specific plan. So with that, I'm glad to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Brent. Before we go to questions, shall I give the applicant an opportunity to speak? Thank you, Terry.
See if I can figure out how to make this work. Oh, it's this side. There we go. Oh, it's sensitive. Let's see. Let's go start there. Okay. Can you help me just 1 second here? Where's the tab for the bookmark? You know, where you can click down so it does page by page. Because there's a whole bunch of pages, and so this one doesn't have it on it. Hit that X right there. Yeah, this one doesn't have it on it. There's where you can book
Right here? You can move page by page.
Yeah, is that it? Okay, awesome. Good evening, Chair, fellow planning commissioners. I'm Terrence McGrath. I'm the owner developer of Watson Ranch and also of Napa Valley Ruins and Gardens. In 20 years of being here and all the times I've been at the podium, I've never witnessed a presentation from staff like that. And there's an old radio show that when I was working with my father, we used to listen to at lunch, and it was called Paul Harvey, and now for the rest of the story. And I'm sure most of you are too young. I think there's some people that probably remember it. So I'm going to defer comment on Mr. Cooper's walk down memory lane with the city general plan and the wonderful word slide he put together there. But that cow left the barn a long time ago, and we're governed by the specific plan, the Watson Ranch specific plan. So what I'm going to try to do is give you a little history on how we got to where we got, and I appreciate the three of you. Sorry, Crystal, we couldn't get together. I appreciate the three of you coming out to do that. So, how do I get it up there?
Maybe you have to close it.
You have to close that presentation and open. Can you assist him?
There we go. So this is out of the specific plan. I'm going to try to start to kind of from the very beginning and take you through. So unfortunately, this is going to take a lot of time over what I consider to be an incredibly simple design permit application. And again, it's the most complicated process I've been involved with in this project over 20 years is this fence design. So again, I'm not going to bore you with all the different issues here. Essentially, this talks about, how the fence should integrate with the community. And I think, as I mentioned to all of you when you did the site visit, I've built something like this similar 25 years ago. The idea was you can see through it, whether you're inside or outside. You can't tag it, very hard to tag. You can't climb it, very difficult to climb. Fits with the aesthetic, and very, very low maintenance once you put it in there. It's really meant to stand the test of time, very similar to the fence we built on the other side. But that fence is obviously more of a residential fence. This fence is really, meant to have a connectivity to the ruins and gardens. So the next issue is sort of, again, Brent made reference to this, but he didn't call it out specifically. This is this is right out of the Watson Ranch specific plans. View fences should be located along any property line between public and private property. That's right smack out of our specific plan. So this trail system that Brent gave you a very cursory overview, there's 3 primary trails inside of Watson Ranch. One is a Class 1 that he mentioned, the Caltrans standards. That Caltrans standard does not apply to a multi-use or to the Ridge to River. And so that whole process that he was doing there was basically a shiny object. It was meant to sort of deflect your attention. So to date, we've built Ridge to River from right here at the intersection of Marcus all the way up here to the intersection of Malin Way. We've built this section of the Vine Trail, which is a Class 1, from here to the intersection here, and then this multi-use trail from the intersection of Rio Del Mar and Rolling Hills all the way down to the end of the project where it comes into Vintage Ranch. 3 different trail types. And just to set the concept of vesting documents, so the specific plan was approved in 18. The DA, which is a 30-year contract between us and the city, was approved in 19. We then revised the specific plan in 23, and we've been under construction for 3 years. So along that route, we've also, again, sorry for having to take you through all this because it is relatively painful. So again, this is a Class 1. It's a 2-foot shoulder, 12 wide hard track or trail, and another 2-foot shoulder. That's the Vine Trail. That's what we built over on Malin Way. And I'll come around to this in just a second. The Ridge to River, 12 and 8. No soft surface. Soft surface shows a shoulder there on the Vine Trail per the Caltrans standards that Mr. Cooper referenced that have no application whatsoever to the Ridge to River. And then the multi-use trail section here, which is on Rolling Hills Drive, which is a 2, an 8, and a 2. And so don't keep those in mind, the numbers in mind, because I'll come back to them in a second. Let's see if I can shrink this. So this is Malin Way. It's built. This is the new city park, or it's going to be the new city park. This is Promontory over here on our right. That's the roadway of Malin Way. You can see there's your 2-foot shoulder, your 12-foot wide, and there's your 2-foot shoulder. That is built. And in order to get that built, we spent 18 months negotiating with staff about the master backbone infrastructure. So those streets, curbs, gutters, light poles, park benches, landscaping, et cetera, that people are now driving on, riding their bikes on, pushing strollers on, that took us 18 months to get those plans negotiated with the city, approved, and then built. So that's what's built on Malin Way. Let's see, let's go on to the next one. Oops, let me see if I can pull this over here. So on Rio Del Mar, let me see if I can orient this. So on Rio Del Mar, remember how I had talked about The Rio Del Mar standard is 12 and 8. There's 12. This is the ruins. There is no soft shoulder. OB is overbuild. You overbuild 2 feet so that the sidewalk doesn't get undermined when you're doing something next door to it. And there's also a lot of grade there. There's a tremendous amount of grade change on the ruin side of both Rolling Hills and Rio Del Mar, which Mr. Cooper just conveniently failed to acknowledge. And then look here, 10.5. The trail standard is 8. That's what's in the Watson Ranch specific plan. So how did it get to 10.5? How did it get to 20.5 feet versus, or how did it get to 22.5 feet versus 20? Any ideas, Brent? It got there because staff asked for 2.5 more feet. So that's an overbuild on that path. So then going on down to, let's see if I can find it here. Oh, there's Rolling Hills Drive. So on Rolling Hills Drive, this is 16 and 17. That's the hotel site. So again, that 2 foot is overbuilt. See that grade change? It goes down steep. So remember in the specific plan, it calls for 2, 8, and 2, calls for 12 feet. Look what's there, 10 and 6, 16. It's an overbuild by 4 feet. Mr. Cooper, how did we get to that extra 4 feet? It came through 18 months of negotiation, city staff requested it. It then got designed into the master backbone infrastructure, which then got approved by staff, which we then built, which was then accepted by the city. All of these trails have been negotiated by the city, directed by the city, we built them, and then they get accepted by the city. The cow left the barn several years ago. So let's go on to the next. So this is, again, I don't know why it's so blowing up on this. So Mr. Cooper points out all these vehicular accesses. There's only one. It's at Marcus and Rio Del Mar. And if the ruins are open, the gate's open. And the other ones are emergency vehicle access. We've had numerous discussions with staff. And frankly, in my experience, in my skill set, in everything I've done both here and in other cities, this is all stuff that's negotiated at a staff level. It should never be in front of you, never. And I apologize for that, I really do. It's embarrassing that I have to be up here doing this. And Mr. Cooper also mentioned the city square. In our updated specific plan, that 2 acres is going away. The city's not gonna own property inside of the ruins, right, Mr. Cooper? It's moving over to the park site that over on the other side of the hotel in Park A. And I don't believe the city has an easement into the quarry lake either. And if you want to talk about public safety, taking this section of fence out around the quarry lake, if it's not part of this, then I'm giving that land to the city. The city's buying that land from me because they need to take that liability. They need to insure it. And that is a big issue. You talk about safety standards, and you're sitting here focusing on 2 feet, and you've got a lake there that's open to the public that has 50-foot cliffs. Embarrassing. So what we've proposed is that we build this fence, and one of the conditions of approval is that we have to submit a landscaping plan for this fence, for the ruins. It's funny, I moved 100 olive trees in there last year. I don't remember staff complaining about that or asking for a landscaping plan to go behind it. So what we've proposed is outlined in green. The red is, in theory, inside of the ruins. That's on the cliff side. And so, in theory, staff wouldn't have purview over that. But it is really, really important that this fence gets built because we can't do construction. We can't secure the site. We can't secure the site, you know, we can't open the site. We can't do anything. And I mean, the other day, Saturday night, I got a bunch of pictures. There was 50 kids having a party in here. The week before, there was a party of 25 down by the lake at midnight. And you're worried about setting the fence back from utility boxes? If you drove out there today, you'll see the temporary fence is actually set back from all those transformers and is set back by 5 feet. Did you notice that, Brent? And those utility boxes are on private property, by the way. I'll just refer to it as staff then.
Thank you, Bob. Mr. McGrath, before we proceed, let's speak with respect and decorum. I understand we would like to, you're giving us the information that we do need, and I respect that, but let's please not point at people and name call.
I
And
apologize.
We will continue.
I apologize.
We'll be professionals here.
I apologize.
Thank you.
What I'm trying to do, sorry, Chair, what I'm trying to do is just point out that there was, none of this was in the presentation. And this is absolutely fundamental to this presentation. And I'm sorry for referring to Mr. Cooper personally, but I'll use city staff.
Thank you.
So these are all the references in the Quarry Lake. And again, I'm not gonna bore you with them. Let me get it back up to full size. So you saw this earlier. Again, I'm not going to bore you with the details. I built a fence very similar to this 25 years ago, and it's a beautiful fence. It's still there. Very little maintenance. I mean, I think this meets all the goals of the specific plan. It's not a cheap fence to build. I mean, it's actually a very expensive fence to build. So let me. So this is important because this sort of summarizes the whole thing. Again, let me see if I can get this so that everybody can see it. So staff had asked me what was the purpose behind what was the design concept behind the fence. So obviously aesthetics and simplicity was really important, security and height, and connectivity and transparency, and maintenance and vandalism. Those 4 things were really important. They come right out of the specific plan, but it's also recognizing what the ruins are and what they're going to be used for, and how we can meet all those standards and also create what I consider to be a piece of art. This is a subsequent letter that we wrote to staff, and in it, it goes through all the different issues. I talked about one, which is the walls and fencing. I talked about the standards. I'll get around to land dedication here in a second, and maintenance. For instance, Artisan, which is a approved project, which backs up to Rolling Hills Drive, which backs up to the multi-use trail, has no setback, 0 setback. And that's an existing condition out here, that the city staff approved. I'll come back to landscaping and irrigation. Topography I mentioned, there's a lot of topography along Rolling Hills Drive and Rio Del Mar that make doing what staff has asked for really difficult. I believe, I also mentioned to the commissioners who toured, I think adding 2 feet is a dangerous condition. I think the transition between a hard surface and that corner of that concrete to a soft surface actually is where you do catch a tire, and that does eject you into the fence. So I actually think it's very counterintuitive to do it. I mentioned it creates a natural skate park. It creates a natural skate ramp if you add a 2-foot fallout shoulder on the other side. Trash, if you start landscaping it, you're going to have a lot of trash collecting at the bottom of it, and so on and so forth. Post-event, people are going to find the shortest route home, and the landscaping is going to get trampled. So the last thing I want to leave you with is if staff really wants this setback, then if you look at this, so it's 2 feet, it's 3,500 feet in length, so it's 7,000 square feet. So we looked at this and said, fine, if you really want the setback, then it's a take. It's a condemnation. And then I also wanted to point out that if you take it and you want the 2-foot setback, then you have a landscaping and irrigation requirement, which is really expensive. And then there's annual maintenance, and that goes on in perpetuity. So this would not be our cost. So that, in a nutshell, is, and then there's some conditions, as I mentioned. One of them is that staff wants a landscaping design, which I think is a complete non sequitur to what we're here tonight to review. And they also want to take out the Quarry Lake piece of the fence, which I think is just, again, it makes no sense to me whatsoever. So happy to answer any questions. And again, sorry, I wasn't meaning to be disrespectful. It's just this issue, I've spent over 100 hours over the last 3 weeks on this issue. And those 100 hours are insanely valuable to me. And it takes me away from bringing the ruins to life and doing what's supposed to be done in those ruins. And so it's near and dear to my heart. And I don't know what's going on here with staff. I truly do not understand how this dynamic changed so quickly in the last 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. But it's what you're seeing here tonight is almost PTSD from 7, 8, 9 years ago, where in 2017, we finally got to a place with the city where we got a mediator between us, and for the next 5 years, that's what produced what you're seeing across the street today. And that dynamic that was happening prior to 2017 is what I'm feeling again today. And again, I have no idea why it's happening, and I'm sorry to burden you with this and air the dirty laundry, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Terry. And thank you for your passion and being with us for so many years. At this time, I'd like to open up the questions from the planning commissioners to Mr. McGrath and or Brent Cooper. Planning commissioners, what are your questions?
My question is for Mr. Cooper. How long or how much time and money is it going to take to maintain the fence?
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Jawanda. The fence it's privately owned, and so that would be a cost for the applicant. Perhaps you might want to answer that one.
Another of my question is, how long do you think the fence would last?
That would also be a question for the applicant.
The fence that we've proposed, it's a great question, by the way, and that was a big part of our consideration, was not only once you put it in, how long does it last, but what's the ongoing maintenance of it, both from a annual maintenance and a capital reserves perspective. That fence, properly maintained, it could be there 50 years from now with very little maintenance.
Another of my question is, how would the fence benefit the community?
So I was just talking earlier with Ken Leary about this. I think you could close it off. There's a temporary fence there right now that you can't see through. And you could easily do that. It's easier to tag a fence like that. It's easier to climb a fence like that. How does it benefit the community? It integrates the ruins into the community and the community into the ruins. And it gives people a chance. If you're, like, for instance, Thanksgiving, you're here visiting your daughter or son or parents who just bought a house in American Canyon or Watson Ranch, and they're out riding their bike or pushing the stroller. They see the ruins, And they're like, oh my God, what's that? And so there's a recognition, there's a transparency, there's an integration into the community, and that's the benefit of the visibility and being able to see through that fence.
Thank you.
All right, I got a couple of questions. Which we off, Bill. All right, so the fence. Now, from what I understand, was this an initial planning of the Watson Ranch project, or was it something that was put in later on?
I'm sorry, Chair, I don't
So
understand.
the fence. So was this was the fence in the initial planning of Watson Ranch specific plan?
Well, let me try to answer the question slightly differently. I would say that the ruins having a perimeter secured fence was always contemplated. Just because you have art there, you have things there that you want to secure. You have events there that you don't want the public to, the general public to have access to. I mean, so there's all kinds of different things that fence would be used for.
Understood. Okay, then so that's will probably lead me to, it's probably a SEPTED thing, what is SEPTED? SEPTED is community policing through environmental design. So that's probably what you're trying to do. You're trying to make sure that place is secure,
Yeah.
make sure there's good ingress and egress so people don't vandalize, people don't steal, whatever the case may be. What are your other measures? Let's say hypothetically, if there were no fences, what are your other measures of security for that particular area?
I mean, you would have to have a security force, and you'd have to have a security force 365 and 24/7. I mean, just because the size of the property, just the ruins itself is 33 acres, and you have access points on all four sides, and other than dogs and security, I don't know how else you would secure it.
Understood. I mean, I guess it's crime prevention through environmental design. That being one of them would be fencing. So my thing is okay, so let's say we did put up a fence. Is it going to be open at certain hours? What do people get locked in that area? Can people get out? Can people get in? Or what's the... So I'm only saying this because I watched the movie today, Gladiators 2, just came out, right? I saw like big castles and remotes and then I saw a big old fence around the thing. It kind of reminded me of what I was seeing when I went with you to the site. Like, I don't know of any other town centers that I've been to anywhere in the Bay Area that has a fence like that around the town center. So I just want to understand that, and I think it's great. I think it's great for security purposes, but I've never seen a fence around a city like that or around a town center like that.
But remember, it's private.
I'm sorry?
It's private property. I mean, and so that's the delicate juggling act here. This is not, a quintessential conventional town center with public streets and, storefronts and street lights and so on and so forth. This is, and again, that was part of my issue and what really, really got under my skin is when staff started going back to a place that honestly, it has no relevance about what we're talking to today. And because all of this is in the specific plan. All of this is part of, like, for instance, the conditional use permit on the 2 amphitheaters. All of this is contemplated. And so, if you're hosting a big event there, you've got to secure it.
Totally understand.
Yeah.
So now let's move on to the bike trails, because that's what we're talking about with the setbacks, the 2 feet and so forth, as you illustrated and showed. Now, Class 1 bike trail, I'm not an engineer, I don't know these kind of things. So if, let's say, someone is cruising down that pathway, and it's butted up against the sidewalk, and say they do get injured or hit, crash, whatever the case may be, being that this is a Caltrans standard, I'm assuming it still is, do we have liability? Does a city have liability because we did not build it towards a standard of Caltrans?
Well, the Caltrans standard that staff is referencing that's the Vine Trail. That's the 2, 12, and 2.
Okay.
That is not the Ridge to River, and it is not the multi-use. Those are internal Watson Ranch specific plan standards. And let me take it out of context and put it into a city context. Like a downtown sidewalk in a city. So it's a city street, city sidewalk, trips and falls in front of your building, I get sued. I've been sued for trip and falls 25 times over the last 35 years. Somebody tripping on a city sidewalk. Like, for instance, in St. Helena, if you trip on that sidewalk, you break your leg, and you're in front of, Elise Walker, you're probably going to sue that building owner because that's where you're going to get a settlement.
Understood. Okay. Again, how high is this fence?
8 feet. Thank you. And again, part of that is you've got to create something that really is elegant, transparent, hard to tag, aesthetically pleasing, but really hard to climb. And a horizontal design, a panel system fence design, like the one we have out there on the north side of Rio Del Mar, you could climb that fence, but you're not climbing that fence because there's nothing to get to on the other side. If that was a fully secured area. Part of this on a simple level, like if you look at just the subset of what we're doing out there on the art side, the Chris Shiflett concert that I hosted, I had 8 artists come in and paint. If that fence is not secured, those pieces get tagged. People put really nasty stuff on top of an incredible piece of art. That alone warrants being able to lock the gates at night, just like the Quarry Lake. You don't want that Quarry Lake open at night. Sure, the public can have access to it, just like a ball field or a soccer field that has a fence around it in a certain time. They lock the gates.
No, thank you for all that. I just want to give myself and the public and the commissioners a visual of what I'm thinking about. And how many egress points do you have into town center, if you will?
We have set aside the Quarry Lake. You have 2 speed tables already designed in Rolling Hills Drive that connect the hotel to the ruins, ruin to hotel. So you'll have 2 access points there, and then you have 1 EVA, emergency vehicle access, that only gets used in emergencies. And then you have Marcus.
3. Is that?
Yeah, and Marcus in Rio is the main entrance. My guess is you will probably have other pedestrian gates that are exits only.
Okay.
So that, if you're at a certain part of the project, you don't want to have to walk all the way back around towards Rio Del Mar and Marcus, or all the way up to the speed table far right-hand side of the hotel. You can push one of the pedestrian exit gates.
Thank you. I'm just thinking of a security and safety perspective from my background and a tactical advantage. If there were something that happened in there, how would people get out? How would first responders get in? So we would keep people in, keep people out. So I'm just thinking of that. If something major were to happen there, how would first responders be even able to get in? So
well, and we've worked with fire. I had fire look at this. I had police look at this, and we've worked, exhaustively with Chief Belia on all of the emergency vehicle access roads, points of egress, ingress. Think of this as, on a simple level, you're building a house. You don't put the roof on first. We've been at this for years, laying down layer after layer after layer. And, it was my mistake in thinking that this would be a fairly straightforward issue with staff. But otherwise, I would have had both police. I would have had fire here, and they can both tell you, we're working together all the time, because they need to get access, to an event. Like you said, if there's an issue, whether it's the amphitheater or whether it's a dinner party, whatever's happening, they've got to get access to it.
thank you, Terry, for that, for all the comments. Any other questions from the commissioners? Okay, at this time, oh, sorry, go ahead.
My question is, do you have a plan if the fence doesn't work out for the property?
Oh. I'm sorry, you mean if we can't build a fence?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd probably just mothball it. Because in today's world, security is so important.
Another of my question is, do you have a plan if the residents of American Kenya have an issue with the fence? And how would you solve the issues with the residents?
Well, that's what the public comment process is for, and that's why we submit the design permit, and that's why we're here tonight. So, people can call in specifically on this issue. Everybody I've talked to loves the fence design. I mean, Janelle Selleck, I wish, from American Canyon Parks Foundation, building the Ecology Center, saw it and just says, oh my God, I want to build the same type of fence around the Ecology Project. I mean, she just loves the fence. So I haven't encountered anybody who doesn't like the fence.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jawanda. At this time, I open public comment.
Okay, so we have Ken Leary. Oh, okay, Beth.
He's going to have me go first because. Oh, I'm speaking for Fran too. I wouldn't say that. This is a lot to comprehend because Fran and I was on the committee years ago with Terry, and this is mind-boggling because when we first were putting this together, it was nothing like this at all. And what it is today is just, I think, I'm very excited about it. I think the community is very excited about it. But the fencing, especially around the quarry, I mean, to me, that makes the most sense because that's a lake. That's where people, my kids used to go in there and play in it. I'm sorry. And it's a scary thing to think that there would be no fence around it. And I'm beginning to understand now because I wasn't focused on just the ruins. I was thinking about the whole facility. But I would see why you would want a fence because you don't want people going in there and in and out at night. I mean, I suppose we're going to have certain hours that it's going to be open and closed. Well, then I can understand that. So I don't know, unless there's a point that I'm missing, I think it's vital to have a fence. From what Terry is describing the fence, it sounds like a great fence. You can see through it both ways. It sounds like it'll last for a long time. But I definitely think around the quarry would be, logically, would be the best thing. Ken, you can just say it better.
Good evening, Commission. Kenneth Leary, resident American Canyon. Before I start, I want to ask the applicant a question regarding the two parties, because I didn't get an invitation to any of those. Did you notify the authorities that there were people in there? Okay, I want to just make sure. And next time, make sure I get an invitation. Second thing, I was on council 2016 to 2020, and as a council member, worked with Terry to get to where we are. And yes, there were contentious parts just like today. And that's the way it is. Protect the public interest, private interest. That's how it works. And you will do your job to protect the public interest, and Terry will do his job to protect the private interest. When I first heard of the fence, I thought immediately, the southern wall. The southern wall, I said, my God, yeah. But then I went and looked at it, and I like the simplistic design. I like the materials used because they're common. Basically, cyclone fence poles. That can be easily replaced or found. You don't have to order them and wait for months and years to get them. So I like that, and I like the rust patina on those, it really looks nice. Now, if they were brass or some other thing that patinaed green, that would be nice too. But that's a little bit more expensive, and I know Terry's on a budget, right, Terry? Now, let us get to the 2-foot setback. But first, I want some clarification regarding the actual 10-foot setback around the utilities, which is only required for 5. So there's going to be some changes in the setback along the fence, whether it's 10, 5, or no setback at certain places. But that's going to affect the build of it. It's going to make it more expensive. Right angles, turns, things are more expensive than a straight line. So 28 seconds. Can I steal somebody else's time? All right, well, thank you, Fran. All right, all right, thank you. So there are a lot of questions that I have regarding that, because what it seems to be, it gets down to a 2-foot setback that is the primary concern. Because when I look at, and we talk about trails, and I asked this question at the council on Tuesday, what class trail was this? Because basically it looks to me like a wide sidewalk. There is no separation or bike path along the street. There is parking along there now that wasn't there, which is kind of nice. I like the view that you can look through there, but I see this as a wide sidewalk, and we can call it a multi-use. I don't think we'll get horses down there, but never know. So it gets down to a 2-foot setback. Now, according to the applicant, it is difficult to build that with the slope and things like that, and I think in some area it is not. The view from the side, who knows? We design a lot of things, and then we go back and say, hey, we could have done a better job. As a former council member, I always want to err on public safety. That's the most important. People will not only take advantage of walking along a sidewalk and looking for the deep pockets, but they'll take advantage of almost anything and sue. So my thoughts are, I always looked at as a team, working with the developer, working with the city, how do we come to a reasonable, considerable decision or compromise that's going to protect both the property and the public? And if it's just a 2-foot setback, that's kind of, and whether or not a gate coming out and you can see and not see, come on, we can figure this stuff out. And like Terry says, we don't really need to be able to do it here, but it should be able to do it within staff and people and working on this. So I like the fence. I like the materials. I know it needs to be protected. That area needs to be protected. You just can't have it open. People will be going in and out. There'll be more parties. I'd probably throw one myself. Terry, I'll make sure you get an invitation if I do. So I like the fence. I'm not truly, really understanding whether this 2 feet is needed or not, because I didn't see that in any of the presentations that I got tonight. So thank you very much.
Is there anyone else in the room that would like to speak before I go to Zoom? Okay. We have Carlota Santino on Zoom. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Hi, this is Carlota Sainato with the Napa County Bicycle Coalition. Thank you for the presentations. I would like to clarify a couple of things. So this trail, these bike paths in front of the ruins and gardens are all Class 1 shared use paths. They are part of maybe different trail networks like River to Ridge and Vine Trail, or they may be called multi-use, but as somebody who works in bicycle facilities and the different classes of bicycle facilities, These are all Class 1 shared use paths that are meant for bicyclists and pedestrians and other road users who are not essentially in cars. So the standards for these paths that not only Caltrans, but also the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, the Federal Highway Administration, all these standards for Class 1s that include the 2-foot buffer do apply to these trails that front the ruins and gardens. They look like wide sidewalks because that is the design for Class 1s in American Canyon. They tend to look like wide sidewalks. But if you look in the Watson Ranch plan, they are all labeled as Class 1 shared use paths when you look at the circulation plan. So we encourage Planning Commission to follow the recommendation of city staff to require the 2-foot shoulder. I know there was some confusion about whether it's important. It is a safety standard by, again, Caltrans, AASHTO, the Federal Highway Administration. It's a standard by transportation experts and planners for a reason. The buffer between bicyclists and vertical obstructions like fences and signposts prevent people from crashing out by hitting it. It renders the full width of the path usable. I know the applicant mentioned they believe it's more dangerous, but transportation experts and organizations define this 2-foot buffer zone as a necessary safety feature. It wasn't necessarily planned for in the Watson Ranch plan because the fence was not in the Watson Ranch plan. When you incorporate a new significant element right next to the shared use path that creates this new vertical buffer, it makes sense that this new element will have a new safety requirement when it comes to the public transportation right-of-way. It may be inconvenient, but it is a road safety standard that should not be considered optional, just like any other building code or road safety standard. It protects users from injury and potential loss of life, and it protects the city from potential litigation by following the standards for these facilities. The Napa Valley Ruins and Gardens and the Class 1 path system are going to be permanent assets for the American Canyon community. They should be constructed correctly the first time around to ensure that the assets are safe for users.
Please
and
wrap
to
up.
avoid the higher cost and time associated with correcting later on. So we are in favor of the 2-foot setback. We're happy to talk more about it offline. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no additional comments.
Okay, at this time, I close public comment. Circling back to the planning commissioner comments.
Director Cooper, I'm just looking at the sidewalks that were really in play in relation to the fence and the 2-foot setbacks, which is pretty much Rio Del Mar and then down Rolling Wood.
Hills.
On just those 2 sections of the fence. Those sidewalks, I believe, according to what was presented here, are built over by a couple of feet from the Class 1 standard bike lane. Is that correct? It was supposed to be 10, it's 12.
I think this would be a great time to introduce our Public Works Director, who is involved in the backbone part. Perhaps her predecessors did, but it certainly wasn't me.
So I guess my original question here is those 2 bike lanes or sidewalks that exist down Rio Del Mar and down Rollingwood as they currently are they wider than the standard for a Class 1 bike lane as they're built now?
Well, the minimum, I believe, in some of the cross sections provided in the slideshow or in the specific plan are like the minimum width is 8 foot.
8 foot.
And they were designed and submitted as 12-foot paths.
So now they're at 12. The 2-foot soft barrier, I don't know if you're familiar with anything around bike lanes, but the intent and purpose for that is, because I mean 2 foot's not very wide. I mean, it's a soft barrier going to indicate when you're going off the bike path, but it's not really going to shield you from anything if you fall down, because most bikes you're going to fall farther than 2 feet. So I'm just running the design of that 2-foot soft barrier purpose.
So if you have something that's over 3 foot in height, there's another section in the specific plan about anything over 3 foot in height, is that you have the handlebars. So if you're going along and you move over for someone and the handlebars go over, you shouldn't be 2 feet over, right? You're probably about 12 to 18 inches if you're over edge of the path, depending on the type of handlebars on your bicycle. You should be able to clear that. But if it's right up against the back of walk and you're having to move over for someone else, either opposing rider or stroller or walker, you might hit those rails.
Okay. My next question goes with the separation between private property and what is the city property, which is the roadway, the sidewalks, all of that is part of city property. On that, again, the same stretch on Rollingwood and the same stretch on Rio Del Mar. Where it is currently built, that sidewalk where it ends, is that the end of city property and private property begins right there?
For the most part, yes.
So right now, that additional 2 feet that we're looking for, would we extend into private property, or would it be kind of the removal of some of the existing sidewalk that is already poured there to accommodate that need?
That hasn't been expressed from the applicant to do that, but it's no different than other setbacks that you see around the city where the property owner has landscaping that's adjacent to the sidewalk, where it is still their property.
Still their property, so that 2-foot soft would be their property?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's what I needed on that. When it comes to the actual design of the fence, I like the fence. I think it fits in very, very well with the ruins as it is now. I don't know what the ruins is going to turn into, but as it is now, you look through the rustic fence and you see the rustic ruins, and I think it's outstanding. I like to be able to look through it. I like the design. I like the height of the fence for once. The 8-foot height that is currently there, I think that is an outstanding idea. All of the design aspects of that fence, I'm highly supportive of. It really comes down to this 2-foot barrier, especially around those 2 roadways that has currently been designed and built out. And I don't know if you know, during the discussion between the developer and the city at that point in time and going through that, when did the fence come in relation to building the fence in? Was that ever discussed during that time period in any way, shape, or form?
That's during the MBI.
Because it's really about the design and built to the design, but the fence was not part of the original design around the Gardens and Ruins?
No.
No. So when was the fence added in, or is that what this is about?
That's what this is about.
Okay, that's what I have. Thank you.
So just wanted to, a couple of comments. Appreciate both of you guys with your presentations. Felt a little disheartening that we couldn't work with the developer and get things together on the staff level. But also, I wanted just to understand and be clear, we do the approval for this. Terry, you had mentioned a bill that you would provide over to the city. Is that something that I'm missing, or, if we do the 2-foot setback, you popped up a heavy lift of a bill on there?
Yeah, it's a big bill.
Yeah.
Let me just back up for a second. So I'm not going to bring up the slides again, but I just want to reiterate. The Vine Trail on Malin Way is 212-2. That shoulder on the hotel side was contemplated. That hotel will have a fence around it. Of course it will. And so the Ridge to River was heavily negotiated in the approval process of our master backbone infrastructure, which staff obviously directed, and we overbuilt by 2.5 feet. There was always, always, always the contemplation that the ruins would be fenced. And so, same thing on Rolling Hills Drive, where it's overbuilt by 4 feet. The math that I showed you it is private property. and the fence is not going to be right to the back of sidewalk, the footing for the fence will be at least 12 inches wide, so the fence will sit back at least 6 inches from the back of sidewalk. So staff's reference about handlebars, there's space over there. But again, that path is 2.5 feet wider than it was called for in the Watson Ranch specific plan standards. And the other one is 4 feet wider. And so the bill up there is, if this comes to pass, this is, from my perspective, this is not property owner responsibility. You've taken 7,000 square feet of land from me. And this is not a 50-foot section. This is 7,000 feet when you start adding all the other numbers here, at least 7,000. It's like 10,000 fence posts. So taking that 2 feet is a big deal. And I know it's hard to see when you're looking at a single line drawing from elevation, but Rolling Hills Drive, where the intersection is at Rolling Hills and Rio Del Mar, that intersection drops 15 feet to the floor of the ruins down below it. That intersection is at like 113. The building is at 100. So in a very short distance, you're falling at a 2-to-1 grade. So if you take 2 feet and then say, oh, build me a fence, I'm building a fence now down there that's probably 6 to 8 feet away from that sidewalk. So you start creating all these really strange conditions. And again, in building the Ridge to River, in building the multi-use, we built them, I built them. There's no irrigation. So any irrigation for that 2 feet would have to come from the ruins. That landscaping, there's no contemplation from landscaping. As I mentioned in my presentation, why would you build such an elegant fence and then put landscaping in front of it? The olive trees are behind it. We'll have landscaping behind it. But if you put landscaping in front of it, there's also who's going to maintain it. You can't put it in the HOA. That is not part of the Homeowners Association for Watson Ranch. And as president of the Homeowners Association, nope, can't put it in there. And so who's going to maintain that? That's a city requirement. The city's got to maintain it. They got to put in the irrigation. So that bill is about what we call in our world taking property from a private landowner. That's a condemnation. And whether it's friendly or adverse, it's a taking. And none of this was not contemplated. None of this was not contemplated.
Chair, I think I'd like to weigh in on a couple of issues. I think it bears on the commission's decision. This is a design permit that has required findings. Those have to be supported by substantial evidence. It involves the interpretation of the specific plan, which has advisory provisions in it, and like any planning document, it has to be consistent with, at its adoption, applicable law. Using those principles, I think you have to give some deference to the MBI placement of the improvements that were accomplished that have been summarized by both staff and the applicant. On one instance, for one of the trails, you're getting an additional amount of 4 feet, on the other one, 2.5. That's an administrative construction of figures 7.6, 7.7, and to a certain extent 7.8 of the specific plan. The obligations for a specific plan are like a general plan. You try to implement the policies that are set forth, but you do it in a balanced way so they don't interfere with other policies of a general plan. I think you have to overlay on that concerns articulated by staff and advanced about public safety in some critical areas where entrances to the NVRG parcel, right? Both as portrayed here and for the utility setbacks that would be required. I'm going to say that's common sense, right? If you ask me our provision of the civil code where that would be the law, I can't find it now, but I'm sure I can. But I can also say that in adopting accepted principles of law, a private property owner has a right, both statutory and under common law, to fence the property. So where does that, you know, what is the accumulation of evidence from the city attorney's point of view? The city attorney's point of view is you have to give deference to the MBI aspect of this. You have to give deference to the staff concern, which I think is well articulated by an advisory standard that can be used for application here. And it's needed because of the configuration of the fence for adequate safety at the points of interest. I think those are things that are critical. The idea that a fence wasn't contemplated, I think you have to look at the entire plan and think about what this is. What is this? This is the Napa Valley Ruins and Gardens. This is like one of the jewels of this entire specific plan land use issue, right? This isn't a series of 5, 6, 7, 8 residential subdivisions and a commercial area approved in sequence. You know, I think both staff and the applicant have gone through a history which, you know, I was involved in. I can give you a perspective also. It's been contentious. You know, I go thesis, antithesis, synthesis, right? A position, opposition, a solution, all right? The matter before you, I think any third party will look at it and say it's relatively minor. Is it complex? Absolutely. But I think you have to look at the planning tools before you and the decisions that have been made when you make this decision, right? Does the property owner have a right to secure the property? Yes. Is there significance to the MBI determination? Yes, there is, both interpretations of the specific plan and the actual increase in the amount of footage that's there. Are there valid security concerns and queuing of traffic concerns that are going to be associated with this? You know, there's, I don't know if it's humor or what it is, but, you know, former council member Leary, you know, I'm sure of one thing out of this. He's going to get an invitation to the parties, all right? But beyond that, the real concerns here are supporting your decision with substantial evidence, right? In terms of, is that substantial evidence present? In the opinion of the city attorney's office, it's present for the utility setbacks, the queuing of traffic, that should be a condition, and this idea that there has to be some type of setback where the entrances are proposed for NVRG. Why? I think that falls in one of these issues where you know, it's obvious. If a lot of people are going to be going in, we have to have clear vision for that. What is that exact configuration? I don't know, but I think the nexus has been established by staff to say the intensity of the permit sought, a fence, that's going to have visual capabilities going in and out. I think that, you know, I think that establishes both an aesthetic purpose and a valid safety purpose. But I don't see how it can be maintained right at the edge of the concrete at the entrances to the proposed land use that's going to take place here. It's going to be 24 parties for Ken Leary. You know, I mean, there's going to be traffic that are going to go to this. So I believe there's a nexus established with respect to setback associated with the entrances. I think there's a safety interest that's been articulated by staff. I think you have to give due deference to the MBI, like I said. There has to be a setback around the utilities for the basis of that's been well stated. You have to provide those providers access those pieces of utility. I think, you know, there are issues that keep coming up with this. One would be public access to the lake, right? Well, it's private property, but I would say go back to what's before you. It's a design permit. I think that's an issue that's the subject of a further determination between the city and the applicant. I don't think that can be decided in this permit. So that's the city attorney's view on this thing. I think there have been a lot of time expended on both sides. I think the safety aspects are something you need to consider in the areas noted. I think the safety of the entire site for purposes of construction is also an issue. We have all had exposure to the issue of tagging, right? There is a lot more expensive, very well-planned construction contemplated with the amphitheater in association with NVRG. You have to give consideration to that, right? Okay, summation, it's not black and white. You got to evaluate what's happened in this property with the standards that are in the specific plan. And to make it clear, given the fact that a private property owner has the right to have a fence, and common law supports that, and given all the other laudatory, principles and policies of the specific plan about how you want this to be special, I think you've got to balance those on this particular request for implementation of the specific plan. On the one hand, we can't just say it's a fence. It's a fence that has aesthetic considerations, but its placement is, I think, the principal issue. And I think you got to look at the evidence that's been presented before you by staff and by the applicant and evaluate it. That's my guidance as I see it as to what goes down, on the ground. So.
Thank you, Attorney Ross. Sounds like we have a lot to consider before we go out and consider a motion. So at this time, I'm going to call for a short recess. For your permission, there, Attorney Ross. We'll talk about it. Can I get a motion for that? 15 minutes. 15 minutes. All right, thank you, folks. We'll be back in about 15 minutes, hopefully.
I would raise would be Government Code Section 54956.9A2, because I think there are concerns that could lead to litigation, and I think those need to be discussed prior to further consideration and action by the Commission. This is solely the recommendation of the city attorney. You have your discretion whether to accept it or not.
Thank you, Attorney Ross. Per the recommendation of Attorney Ross, per Government Code 5496A2, I'd like to go into closed session.
What time is it? Jesus. 8:12. Where are we going to go?
to get invitations.
What? Hey, you know, what's that?
I said he's just plucking to get invitations.
Hey, why not? I mean, if you're gonna do
Hey,
something.
I didn't even get invited to the holiday party there. She didn't invite her dad.
Oh, well, you know, you probably would have embarrassed her.
Probably.
Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. It is 8:37. I call this meeting back in session.
Mr. Chair, there's no reportable action under the common law attorney-client privilege, and that provided by Government Code Section 54956.9A2. That would be the report upon return from closed session.
Thank you, Attorney Ross. And before we go on to make a motion, I'd like to go on to special conditions of approval on the NVRG. And I'd like Director Cooper to please go ahead and illustrate that.
Staff had recommended an additional condition of approval related to prior to issuance of a building permit, applicant shall submit a stacking and queuing study to determine location for each gated vehicle entry. That would be a proposed new condition.
Thank you, Director Cooper. Okay, at this time, I'd like to entertain a motion with modifications. Yep.
The suggestion would be go through the proposed conditions, to deal with those first, and then based on that, deal with the overall application for a design permit.
Thank you, Attorney Ross. So, the special conditions of approval that we will be going through line by line. Number 68, we're deleting that. Number 69, prior to the issuance of a building permit for the NVRG, vertical post fence, a 10-foot corner line of sight visibility per engineering standard 3.09 shall be provided at pedestrian and vehicle access points. 70, prior to the issuance of a building permit for the NVRG, a vertical post fence, locations where the fence changes directions by 90 degrees within 2 feet of a bicycle trail shall soften the corner with a diagonal connection that begins 2 feet from the place where the fence changes direction. 71. Prior to the issuance of a building permit for the NVRG vertical post fence, the fence shall be set back a minimum of 5 feet from an above-ground utility for a greater amount per utility standards. And of course, we just added on a stacking and queuing analysis for vehicles.
Chair Cruz, if I could just make sure I understand your proposal, and that would delete condition 68, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Director Cooper.
Okay, thank you. And retain 69, 70, 71, and a new condition, probably 72.
Yes, it would be stacking and queuing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. What's your action on 72? Oh, 72.
I believe our action on 72, we got rid of 72, but we added.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the clarification. Condition 72 in the packet describes removing the fence along the south side of Wherry Lake. I believe you were saying that condition is deleted from your proposal, and a new condition 72 requiring a stacking analysis would take its place.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct. With those conditions read, do I have any, Attorney Ross, do I have anything that I missed?
Okay, you know, again, I want to make sure I understand the position of the commission on these conditions, because they are conditions for what I anticipate to be a motion of approval for the design permit. And with respect to the perimeter fence to be removed from the south side of the quarry, you want that to be subject to a staff analysis or just removed?
Deleted.
Deleted, correct? Yeah.
All right, I'd like to amend that. So we're actually going to keep 72. No, we're not going to keep 72. I'm confused.
I think if you're going to maintain the integrity of security of the site, you want that deleted.
Right.
Which we did. Stating for the record again, we are deleting 72, but making 72 stacking and curing. Is that clear?
Okay.
Okay. So again, we adopted, we removed 68. We adopted 69, 70, 71, removed 72, but we're adding stacking and queuing. Is that, are we clear on that? Yes. Okay.
Thank you. I'm clear on that.
So then I make a motion to recommend a resolution approving a design permit for a Napa Valley Ruins and Gardens vertical metal post perimeter fence located across the Rio Del Mar East and Rolling Hills property frontage, assessors parcel numbers 059-430-032 and 059-430-025, file number PL 24-0026 with the modifications and changes.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Yes. Commissioner Andrew Goff,
Aye.
Commissioner Crystal Malari,
Aye.
Vice Chair Devet Mohammed,
Aye.
Chair Brando Cruz.
Aye. Thank you, Planning Commissioners. Okay, moving on to business. There is none. Management and staff oral reports. Director Cooper.
Right. Thank you, Chair Cruz. I'll be very brief on some of the highlights going on in the Community Development Department. At the City Council meeting earlier this week, the City Council approved the SDG 220 conditional use permit for our new warehouse on Commerce, the last of 3 parcels. Also approved was Watson Ranch Lot 7 subdivision map by KB Homes for 136 single-family homes. On Oat Hill, on the upper parcel, our building divisions just recently approved 3 new 18-unit apartment buildings and the clubhouse and the pool. So we'll be seeing some changes up there soon. The Napa Cove project, previously 2 of the 3 buildings had received their occupancy permit, and very recently the third one earlier this month received its occupancy permit. So there'll be new families moving in there for the whole project. In Canyon Estates, we have a new design permit application. This one is proposed by Richmond American Homes, and their proposal is to develop semi-custom homes on 33 of the 35 lots. And so we're just reviewing that project now. And the environmental impact report under request was, public review period was extended to December 27. So we'll be picking up, hopefully responding to comments in the beginning of the new year. And that's my update.
Great. Thank you, Director Cooper. Okay, moving on to commissioner items. Commissioners, what are your items, if any? Well, I'd like to give first of all, thank you all for my time here with the Planning Commission. These 2 years, I learned so much with experience. I'm still continuing to learn. Looking forward to my next job as a city council member. I know it's not too far from this, but I'm going to remain here at the dais. But again, first of all, I want to thank my fellow planning commissioners, Vice Chair Devet Mohammed, Commissioner Goff, Commissioner Altman, who's not here, Commissioner Malari, and of course our youth commissioner, Jawanda. Thank you very much for your wisdom and your knowledge and everything and just being part of this. For staff, Director Cooper, for just being my mentor and the wisdom that you've bestowed upon me. Attorney Ross, Deputy Attorney Bellardo, who's not here today. Of course, Public Director Schmitty. And of course, Deputy City Clerk Hall. Thank you very much. IT support, who's not here, is back there. Thank you very much for everything. And of course, thank you to my community members for always showing up. Beth, Ken, and of course, Fran. Thank you so much for your time. Again, love the time here at Planning Commission. Thank you very much. All right, time is 8:50, meeting adjourned.